At the New Jersey SBDC Network, our mission is simple: to help businesses grow and succeed. Our consulting, training, and information services make it easier for businesses to reach their potential. Whether you're currently in operation or just starting out, we have the right tools, resources, and expertise to help you succeed. Visit us online to get started on your path to success today.
A pleasant good morning to everyone. My name is Takoa Bell. I am one of the event coordinators for the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark. And on behalf of Dr. Tendai Enduro, our regional director, I would like to welcome you all to our Independent Contractors versus Employees, Adapting Your Business to a Changing Workforce webinar. For those of you here that are unfamiliar with the SBDC, it stands for Small Business Development Centers. And here at the New Jersey Small Business Development Centers at Rutgers-Newark, we serve as the premier provider of business training and technical assistance services to establish small businesses, startups, and to entrepreneurs. We are one of 12 centers in the NJSBDC network, and we service those in Essex County. Our center here is hosted by the Rutgers Business School and funded through a public-private partnership agreement between the Small Business Administration, Rutgers University, and the New Jersey Business Action Center. Our mission here is to help entrepreneurs, as well as business owners, start and grow sustainable, successful businesses through the delivery of one-on-one business consulting, training, and technical assistance programs. Now, all these services are provided to you at no cost and are paid for by your tax dollars. If you or your business is located in Essex County, our website is www.rnsbdc.com. And once you're on the website, on the top right-hand corner, we have a red button labeled Request Counseling. So clicking on that button will lead you to fill out some information about your business or your business idea, including the help you're seeking. And within 24 to 48 business hours, one of our consultants will reach out to you for an assessment. And for those of you here that may not be in Essex County, our headquarters website is www.njsbdc.com. And on that website, you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office. For the benefit of everyone attending today's webinar, you will be having the ability to ask your questions via the chat and Q&A feature here on Zoom. We do ask you to use the Q&A feature because it will help us to remain organized, and we'll have all the questions and answers in one designated area. So please feel free to ask your questions and we'll do our best to respond during or at the end of today's webinar. A copy of the presentation slides, along with a video recording of this webinar, will be emailed to you within 48 to 72 business hours so that you can refer to all this information long after the webinar has ended. It is now my pleasure to introduce you all our presenter for today's webinar, Jeannie Rock-Bailey. Jeannie is the president of Rock-Bailey Enterprise and an SBDC consultant here at the NJSBDC at Rutgers-Newark in the areas of human resources management, state and private sector certifications, and supplier diversity contracting. And now, without further ado, I will turn today's presentation over to Jeannie. I think you're on mute, Jeannie.
No, I was just,
Okay.
wait, I thought you were gonna bring my screen up. No. So I'll bring my presentation up fine. Independent. Here we go. Good morning, everyone. I hope you can hear me. I am gonna go by Takoya's poll. It's a pleasure to be here with you this morning. This is actually the last time that I will be presenting this webinar. And so I have decided to take some just some creative licensing and sharing some information with you, because since I did it in June, so many things have happened and so many questions have been asked. So I think it's best that that I, as a not only as a consultant for SBDC, but just in terms of the values that I have as a consultant in general with my practice, I think it's important to let you know that as an HR professional and consultant, it's always my responsibility to make sure that if the client has a question about something, to go and do the due diligence to answer the question to the best of my ability. And after our last workshop, there were clients that had questions about 1099 and changes. And some of them I wasn't aware of. And what struck me is that the resources that I had been using, in addition to some attorneys, weren't updated on these changes as well. And it's important that if you're not sure, of the information that you're getting, and so often you don't know because you're seeking out advice, always try and reach out to that third party. Even if you come to us at the center, or if you have an attorney that you use, or you use free legal service through Seton Hall Law School or Rutgers Street Law School, always seek it out, because this is the time with all of these changes going on that it's important for you to have the best counsel as possible. And it's not because you may suffer financial penalty. It's just that you always want to make sure that you're giving your client and your employee the best advice you have at that time. And it surfaced during the last presentation, and I'm very open about, I'll make the change, but I have to do the due diligence first. But this area with 1099s, especially since the pandemic, even though I have a feeling that these changes were going to occur, regardless of whether we had incurred this horrible disaster for last year, but there are also ways that you can stay on top of HR and items that involve your employees, or employees that you want to hire, or contractors. You can also Google alert the title. Google Alert will give you information about the title. It may not go into the weeds, but it will give you some information. So I wanted to start our program out with that commercial break, because I am going to give you as much information as I can about contractors versus employees, contractors and 1099s versus employees, and things that I think will help you make the decision when you have to bring on someone to work with you. I like to think of my workshops are the kind of professional development and information that businesses need that you can use right away, instead of, what other kinds of research do I have to do to use or to answer some of these questions. I think of it as cash and carry in a lot of ways, because as a small business owner myself, and as one who, thank goodness, I am growing and involved in this situation in terms of hiring 1099s, it's appropriate that I share with you what I've learned. So I think the best way to start this out is to look at the results of some of the employment decisions during the pandemic. And I always like to set the stage, a scenario, because we were all involved in a situation in 2020. So some of this might resonate with you, it might resonate with others that have businesses, or you may have just seen it as you walk through your daily life during that time. But what occurred is that businesses had to make a decision about who they were going to bring on. And as much as it damaged so many of our small businesses, thank goodness for PPP and EIDL, but there were so many other businesses that flourished during this time. And they did it because of a lot of reasons. The kind of business that it was, if it was essential services, they needed more people, or a similar business that required additional help. So they were faced with this decision of, how do I do this? I can't afford to bring in an employee. Employees can't come out. People are not coming out to work. So how can I solve my situation of needing more people and having a resource where I could get them? So they looked at temps, contractors, and usually contractors for this discussion has a contract with you. 1099s, on-call, or freelancers. These were the main categories of workers that vendors and employers sought while they were going through this pandemic. And temps, temp agencies, of course, incurred a lot as well, but because of the fluidity of a temp, they became very needed and sought after at that time as well. So then you looked at the occupations, positions that occurred in this changing workforce. And I have to add another thing to this, and Tako is going to update this presentation. But when we initially decided to do this, we looked at what was happening now. We attached a title to what was happening in real time. So it was managing your business within a changing workforce, because that's what was happening. I'm going to do another webinar on human resources and before and after, before 2020, during 2020, and what's happening now. And when I look at this changing workforce, when this was originally started in 2020, you look at how some of these things are still, some of these workforce are still active. Some have gone back to maybe not full time, but a little remote access, some telecommuting, and then some people that are in the workforce are in their offices at this time. But what's key, and what I always look at in terms of trends and key, is that this changing workforce played such a major impact during this challenge that we had in 2020, that now it's become standard. Uber and Lyft drivers, we've had them, but they became more active because of how people needed to get around. And so those Uber and Lyft drivers have that relationship with those companies. And what are they? They're 1099s, carting food and passengers in their own cars. What were they? They were independent contractors. Healthcare industry, especially nurses and home caregivers, some of them work as 1099s, even though there are some changes going on now. It started a while ago where in some cases they have to start their own businesses, but for the sake of this conversation, there were 1099s, media creatives to get these ideas out for people, for businesses that resonated with what was going on, that they could continue to use to brand themselves and to be sought after by people who are looking for creatives in media, public relations, marketing. So people would know that they were still alive. They were hiring 1099s. IT techs and field services, a lot of them were 1099s. And retail too, they were 1099s as well. The key to all of this though, and this will prevail throughout this presentation, is that as businesses, we have to make sure that we can differentiate between a 1099 and an employee, because they're two distinct categories in an organization. One major distinction is that employees get benefits. So when you see that your 1099s are being treated as employees and you're thinking about giving them benefits, you need to roll the tape back, because that's when businesses get into trouble. And the interesting thing about it, and you'll see this later on in the presentation, is that the psychology of the 1099 is either to stay as a floater, independent, meet a lot of cool people, get to use my craft in a lot of different industries, or it's the mentality that I am going to do this work until the market opens, until I can get a full-time job. If you as an employer keep those two factions in mind, then you'll have a better understanding of how to treat one and how to treat another. Because employees get angry when they see that 1099s are coming in and doing work that they were doing, and 1099s can get comfortable wondering why they're not getting benefits. So I wanted to make sure that I gave you this information about what the occupations in that changing workforce look like. And interestingly enough, this isn't a new phenomenon. We didn't have COVID, but we had other challenges that we faced in this country that represented the need for a 1099 worker. And at that time, and I'm putting this up here for a variety of reasons, because the generations that this changing workforce represented were all of the categories of workers that were presented to us at a given time. And so when we think of, I wanted to just give you a picture of what these workers look like, because we've seen them. We've seen them if they're not delivering food in their car, if they're in a community where the restaurant still wanted to get the work out, they use their workers that could walk to a business. They use those workers, and often they used people that were not I'm not going to say the traditional workforce that we're used to, but we're used to now, but they were not in a workforce that we work with every day. And so I took a look at the baby boomers, and before the baby boomers, there was a workforce called the traditionalists. And I just wanted to give you a sense of what those workers look like in terms of age, distribution of age. So your mind will see or remember how you saw this generation participate during this time, and it's still active. If you look at the traditionalists, they're back, not back, I would say they're back, but they represented a time from 1928 to 1945. And we said, oh my goodness, when was that? They're still active. There's a group of them that are still active all over the country, and I can vouch all over the world. But their positions are different. They came in handy during this time for the needs of business owners who identified that they were still active, healthy, and could perform a task. If you look at Gen X, Generation X, some people consider them in the millennials, that's 1965 to 1980, 41 to 56, still very active. Trying to, from an HR perspective, it was this generation and millennials that were really engaged in the remote access or telecommuting, if that was a possibility for them. But we saw them. We were a part of them if you were working at that time, or we hired them. So when we go down the scale in terms of age and we look at millennials, they're from 1981 to 1996, 25 to 40. So many of them, because of the positions that they took the transition from going from an office to home much better. I'm not saying all of them, I don't know all of them, but the research shows that they took that transition a lot easier than others because of the way they were raised. I tend to think it was because of the way they were raised in a I call it an ATM environment. We put the card in, you get your money, keep going. So the changes, I'm not saying that they weren't affected by them, but the change was something that allowed us as business owners to consider them as 1099s, which is something that I did, that I seriously looked at a population of people that could come in or work for me virtual, 24 hours a day virtually. And then we have this Gen Z, and they're coming in from 1997 to 2012, which means that it's the 9-year-old to 24-year-old. So I found this very interesting too, because of where I'm physically located, I couldn't see that population. But when I talked to my colleagues and I did more research on where they were, so many of them were working for their families, I want to say even the 9-year-olds. They're very skilled on all kinds of social media platforms. Some of which they weren't, but they are. But the generations in total were represented during this period. So if we fast forward and think about what's happening now, what I want you to do is think about if you see this generation as we're trying to open up. And I'm seeing them. I'm seeing the traditionalist and law firms. I'm seeing the baby boomers starting their own business or collaborating with other people who own a business because they have a business skill. I see the millennials growing. And then, I mean, I happen to have some Gen Zs. I'm amazed at what some of these 9 and 10-year-olds will do and can do. Not to say that we're paying them for it, not to say that they should be considered as 1099s, but what I am suggesting is that if you're an owner, and I have the list here of people who participated, if you have your own business and you feel that a member of these generations can assist you, it would behoove you to seek them out, because so many of them have the skills and they've survived. And I'm not saying which generation you should go to, because it will always depend on who's the most qualified for the position, but they're there, they're working, and they're there. And it's a population, in many instances, that are not looking for benefits. Some of them, if they're true to the 1099 philosophies of one, getting a job so I can look for a better job, or getting, which our jobs would just be to help them sustain and maintain whatever it is they're trying to keep. Or if you're looking at a generation, not a generation, but a category of workers that are 1099s that are saying, I like going from media to construction to, I mean, look at all the people I meet. Look at all the skills I've learned about industry. They're there. So this is a thriving population of workers, and most of them are skilled. They're skilled workers. They either have degrees or they have work experience, or they just get it. I'm just suggesting that you continue to seek out generations of workers who are interested in having the title of 1099. So when we look at compensation, I think this was one of the biggest changes for me. When we look at compensations for 1099s, what is a hot issue right now is for your 2020 taxes, you have to divide your 1099s up in terms of the documents that you submit. And this is where I had to do a really deep dive, because my resources that I had been using all along did not mention the 1099 NEC, which is, it doesn't replace the miscellaneous, but it is very specific to who you submit that 1099 NEC for. And that is the 1099 or worker who's made $600 or more. You submit the 1099 NEC. For the worker who you've, and I think the statement is you paid miscellaneous benefits for. And so that there are also maybe 10 or 15 different categories of 1099. But I'm not going to introduce those to you. This is an appetizer, not a deep dive. And most of the clients that we work with are not a part of that, of that industry that need that tiny 1099. And if you're interested, you can always contact me and I can get it to you. But what's really interesting is that when you think about the 1099 NEC and miscellaneous, what I found very interesting is that I have a client now, and this was just so appropriate that it came up. I'm out of the box. I love it. She's an out of the box business, out of the box in terms of the service is non-traditional, and her way of looking at her business in a way is non-traditional. So I thought it was very smart of her to consider a traditional HR person to give her some guidance on how to put these tools together. And one thing that she wanted to do is she wanted to give her above expectation 1099s a bonus. So immediately I said you couldn't do that, because then if you give them a bonus, you give employees a bonus. You don't give them a bonus. And I thought of other ways that we could enhance their hourly rate that would look like a bonus, but it wasn't a bonus because it was a one-time, not a gift, but it was a one-time increase to their rate that one should not consider is going to perpetuate during the time that you're with us. So I started doing some more research on it and found out that yes, 1099s can give bonuses, but they have to be separate. It's all included in the total amount is included in the NIC if I'm correct, but you can also, or I recommend that you should put that on that miscellaneous, because what you have to be careful of when you're thinking that you want to give more is you have to be careful of the tax break it puts you in. There are so many things that you have to consider from a position of wanting to be good, but it puts you in a different tax category rather than what you're already in. And you cannot decide, which I thought, who would do this? You cannot decide that if I'm going to give you a bonus, then I am going to cut in half the amount the project was for and give you half as earnings and the other half as a bonus, and then put it all together. Why would someone do something like that? This is where you do due diligence, because some tried, and that it tried, wasn't successful, weren't penalized because they consulted someone before they did it, at least from my research. They consulted someone, because this new document isn't due until you submit your 2020 taxes. So then you have this whole issue of 1099s. And remember, the NECs are $600 or more, and miscellaneous could be less than. Then you have your NECs, and then you have part-time employees, and they're designated as such. And with a part-time employee, they're giving a W-4 when they start, and at the end of the year, they're given a W-2. With a 1099, I recommend that you give them W-9s when they start the project with you. And then at the end of the year, they're given a 1099. They're called 1099 because of the back end of the deal. Why I recommend that you give them a W-9 in the beginning is that this is also a very fluid population. And that fluid in the sense of the address they gave you when they started may not be the address that they have when they leave. or at the end of the year. So many businesses that engage the service of a 1099 don't have them fill out a 10 W-9, and they're just paying them out of the pool of money they have to pay them, and they just have contact information because they're responsible for their taxes. I'm suggesting that you have them complete a 1099, so you can say, this is the address that you gave me. You didn't follow up with a new address. This is where we sent your 1099. It's really a document. It's documentation for you as the owner that the 1099 was sent. And even if you're using an accountant, I use accountant services, I always want to make sure that they have all of these updates, because you can hire so many 1099s that you can't stay on top of them. So these are distinct. This is a distinct difference from what you might have submitted last year for your 2019. But for 2020, it's got to be an NEC or an MIS or a miscellaneous. So, and I touched on this. Who are the 1099 workers? They're changing the way we as owners look at the labor market. And when I talk to owners that have been in business like 40 years, they'll say, "Oh, you mean the gig economy? I remember them." And so it's the transition after a conversation like that, from my perspective as an HR consultant, makes it so much easier if I can give examples so they understand, now this is what you have to do, right? So they're companies that want to use their talent. They change the way that that we look at the workforce, and they're there to meet your needs only. They're not there for staff meetings. They're not there to be on all the calls unless it's directly related to the project. Because to invite them to those kinds of situations could imply that they're an employee. And I'm going to get to what kind of challenges that brings to you as well. But the workforce has been around. You're also, like Takoya says, going to get a copy of this presentation. And I am always open to receive information from you in regards to questions that you may have. And I'll tell you, today I'm not a 1099 expert. I know a lot more. Soon I will be, because I'm going to take the classes with people who can give the right information. But I won't ever play the role of your accountant, because these are conversations that your accountant should be having with you, or whoever is doing your taxes should have with you, in regards to the documents that you have to submit on everyone you paid in 2020. And there's, their IRS is behind in a lot of ways, but on this topic with 1099s, they've got to catch up, because the abuse might have been rampant, and employees will be the ones who complain and sue. So, and take it to the step of suing you because they feel that a 1099 took their position when that was never the intent. If you have a multi-categorized workforce, the intent is for them to come in, fill a void, fill the position of added work that can be done inside, but the demands are different. The expectations may be different for a 1099. And you clearly have to have the distinction. I ask my clients to put something in writing on what their responsibilities are, what they're there to do. I also ask them to put a beginning and end date. And if they're going past the end date, it's just an amendment to that agreement. So any opportunity that the client has to make sure that they've informed them and treated them as a 1099 contract worker and not as an employee, I suggest you do for your sake. And I'm not beating a drum. I just think from a safety perspective, you want to be in a position of where you can say, no, Ginny was never, she's cool, but I never thought of her as being an employee. She never got paid sick days. If she was out, she didn't get paid. And that was in the contract. She never accrued any time. She didn't get paid for holidays if we were closed. I mean, you want to be in a position where you can shoot that out if asked. Even if an employee asks you, you want to be in a position to say that, because you have too much at stake to not get the answer. So I'm gonna try right here. Can we hire our children as employees or contractors? What are the, well, first of all, you have to look at the age. And secondly, you have to treat them as contractors or employees. Just what I'm telling you to do. If they're 9, obviously no, even though I know a 9-year-old I'd love to hire. But yes, you can do that. I mean, the New Jersey state laws for hiring our kids, such as age restrictions, it is, what is the age where a person can work? And I think it's 16. And then the challenge of hiring any family member is how that tugs at our hearts, and how we stop treating them as employees and we treat them as family when they sit right next to someone who can't get away with the things that we allow our kids or family to do. So from an HR perspective, you've got to be very diligent with how you hire a family member. They should have a job description. They should have to apply with all the rules and regulations. If it's just you and your family member, you can slide a little, even though I've had cases where family members have sued their boss, who happened to be a family member, because they were treated differently or they weren't given all the benefits they were supposed to do. So that's why I'm almost rigid with my clients with this, where I want to see a package for family members, a new hire package for family members that I would see for anyone else. I hope I answered your question. My contact information will be at the end of the program. You can reach me. Hopefully the best way to reach me is through the SBDC, but I do have my contact information at the end. Guys, I just really want to make sure that this information resonates with you in a way that you can see some things that you may have done wrong, not wrong, or challenge, or see things that you don't want to anticipate, that you don't want to engage in, because we need them. I need a 1099 boutique firm, grateful for all this business. But if I continue to work in my business, I'm not going to work on it, and my revenue will not show my efforts. So that's when you make the decision to bring someone in. But they all have contracts. They all have, they can't work any overtime. I give them X number of hours. And if you have to exceed that, you have to come back to me, especially because then that's my money, right? And I want to make sure that I watch my money. But there's no benefits or anything like that. And I sought them out. I sought them out through a lot of different resources. So I hope I answered your question. Employers' concerns about this workforce. The cultural impacts, workforce productivity, and the financial bottom line. So what's important about the cultural impact is not necessarily the culture of the individuals that you hire. It's not their culture or their ethnicity or their race. It's more the culture that you've established with your employees in your workforce. It's employees versus contractors. If your culture has not allowed you to introduce the fact that you're going to bring someone in because we have, you don't even really have to give an example, but I tend to give a little bit more. But we're bringing some people in because we've got some projects that need to get out the door, and I know that you're fully loaded. I can't give this to you. If your culture doesn't allow that kind of communication, and you bring a 1099, or it's more a 1099 than a contractor, because you bring contractors in to do specific positions, and in many instances, they're obvious. It's the 1099 that comes in and does something same or similar than an employee. That's where the employer's concerns start to rise because they didn't get ahead of it. We didn't get ahead of that. Workforce productivity is something that we have to watch as well, because employees will say, well, why should I do this work when you're bringing them in to do it? And in 9 times out of 10, they're making more money, which is another bone of contention. But and now you can't stop employees from sharing their salaries. They can talk about their salaries open, but 1099s, I haven't had experience where 1099s have told employees what they're making, but I'm sure it's happened, and that decreases your productivity. And you always have to look at your financial bottom line, and you have to make sure that the person that you're bringing in can do it at the cost that they say they can do it, and they can leave with it done. That's how I look at it. You bring you in for a specific assignment. I certainly can't do it. My VAs can't do it. I know how long it should take. That's why I'm putting that in the contract. And then I know how much I save or how much more I have to pay. And as employers, even if you don't have any employees right now, remember, if you're in business, you have one employee and it's yourself. As an employer, we have to look at all of this in addition to workers' comp, in addition to benefits, in addition to COVID benefits based versus actual sick person, someone who's sick versus someone who's been around COVID and had to take a sick day. They're handled differently. You have to think about all of these challenges that we face that keep us up at night. So I just suggest that you get ahead of it. Use this webinar to allow you to think about some of the things that you might not have thought about prior to bringing on a 1099 when you've got employees. And another, I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I thought I want to say this now. Another challenge that employers have had is that they may bring in 1099s, a number of them. My case, it's been 3 of them. They all came from different resources, and they were all making a different amount doing the same job. You don't have to explain it to them. You got to look at how that's affecting your financial bottom line and why you made the decision. What it did impact in my case is it impacted the effects that it had on the staff, because the 1099s had no problem talking about it. Oh, I'm making this, I'm making $15, I'm making $25. Why are you making $25? Because I have a degree, whatever. And then you have your employee making $15 an hour, if she's making that, if they're making that. So these are things that you have to consider when you're bringing in these 1099s. I'm going to go to another question. Does a contract replace a Form W-9? Well, they really serve 2 different purposes. The contract speaks to the services rendered. The W-9 speaks to the retention of the contractor. But for me, it speaks to where they're physically located at the time of the signing of the contract, when they start the business. So if there was a discussion of what I should have over another, I would pick the contract. I'd be more concerned about them sticking to the specifics of the contract than how I was going to track them down to send them their 1099s. Because a lot of employers would just say, look, it's your responsibility to keep me up to date. I sent it out. I like to be a little bit more, more sensitive to their plight and the situation that we find ourselves in. And also protect myself by saying, this is what we have. I guess now in thinking about it, if you've got an address on your contracts, which I usually don't have, that could satisfy both of those things. So you don't have to have a W-9, but I find for smaller companies like ours, like mine and our clients, that W-9 has saved them. Because people have come back and said, well, I never got my 1099. Well, where did you move to? Well, this is the address you gave. And so not that it corrects the continuance of a conversation that we don't have time to continue. So that's why I suggest that, you use a W-9. It's not mandatory, but it's there. It's there for a reason. So, and I always think from, because I want to represent my clients and I also represent some employees. And I want to think on both sides. If it's not gonna hurt me, when they sign the contract, they sign the W-9 and make a copy or send it to the accountant or send it to accounts payable so we have it in our file, that's fine. It's not gonna hurt me. But if I had to choose one over the other, I'd choose contract. Okay. So I hope this is helping you. So when we look at the cultural impact, which I alluded to, looking for full-time jobs but need money to support themselves and their families until they find their perfect job or position, or a labor force that either don't want or need a full-time job. That is one of the major cultural impacts on your business. I say major because you're looking at how if you have two 1099s and one represents both of these perspectives, how that can impact your current workforce. And you have to be astute enough to identify it and smart enough to take immediate action to correct it. And that action is to make sure that your employee understands their value and the significance of the position and the kind of benefits that they're getting that this population doesn't get. And the fact that you hired them because they're vested in this business, they're vested in our growth. These two may not aren't. One's invested in getting the perfect job, which may not be you, but they need the money. And the other one is vested in floating, until I find that perfect job, that perfect situation, or because I just like to do it. And I'm hearing more of that now than the perfect job. It's so interesting because not finding or wanting or going back to the perfect job is what we're seeing in these employment numbers. I don't want to believe, this is a commercial break, I don't want to believe that it's unemployment, even though my people say it is. Jen, wake up, it's unemployment. I don't want to believe it. I want to believe that people are saying, you know what? I did that job perfectly for you while I was in my pajamas and there was no problem. I dressed up for staff meetings. So now to go back to a work environment, I've got to think about it. And that's some of the challenges that I'm working on right now. Workforce productivity, full-time, part-time, contractors or 1099s, freelance, temps, and on-calls. These are the considerations that you make when you think about workforce productivity and what you're getting at above. What I also found interesting about the 1099s with bonuses, the regs said that you can also include performance metrics, which I'm really a fan of. And so I'm working on performance metrics for 1099s so that, yes, we're an at-will state, but I want to make sure that people understand that, you know, you were doing a great job. That's why I'm thinking of giving you a bonus, or you were doing a so-so job. You missed appointments. If that was part of the position, I want to be in a position where I offer the client that as well. But I thought it was very interesting that they said that Department of Labor said that you could add that to your criteria when you're giving a bonus, because I think that you should have criteria to give a bonus. What does exceed expectations mean to a 1099? What does that mean? I think you should have those criteria to justify giving them any kind of money. I also think that for your books, it doesn't have to be shared with them, a 1099, that you should have some salary ranges for your 1099 based on the hourly rate that you're paying them. So if you were going to consider a bonus, you could start them out at the minimum or the midpoint and move them up to the max based on the total amount that you're going to pay them. You can bring them in and graduate them up. So that's thinking as if that's thinking like they're employees, but that's also managing your money. So these are things to consider when it's workforce productivity: full-time, part-time, and then you have your contractors. And I put them all under contractors, even though they may not be considered as such. The 1099s get NECs or miscellaneous. The freelance, depending on how much you're paying them, if they're doing over $600, you should give them a 1099. Temps, usually they come from an agency. If they work over a period of time, you have to hire them. On-calls is when you need them. On-calls are like per diems. And you have to make sure that they outside of the 1099, they have to understand what category they're in. On the 1099s, corporations like S&Cs, they don't get that. Sole proprietors don't get a 1099. An LLC that goes above $600 would get a 1099. And I'm saying single member or partner. That's what I'm seeing today. Now, I told you when I started this one, there were things that were out that it's a little fuzzy, but at the end of the day, I don't think it hurts to give them 1099. Except corporations, if you want. I had some clients that gave me a 1099 and others, look, I don't have to give it to you. All I have to do is report what I paid you. And that's fine with me too. But you just have to know when to do it. And also when you're looking at bringing on a 1099 and you know that you have a certain amount to pay them, watch your money. Because if it gets like to $400 and you're thinking they're not really what I thought they were, you have every right to cut that out. And then you still have $250 before you would have, it's $200 before you'd have to give them a 1099. And that's $200 you've saved for the next 1099 you want to bring in. That could do a better job for you. So as you watch your dollars with your full and part-time staff, you should watch your dollars with your 1099s as well. And don't be hesitant to end the relationship. You don't have to depend on that. Oh, I'll do better. We don't have time for you to do better. You don't have to, they're not bound by the employment at will doctrine. They're not employees. And that's why you have to be so careful that you never treated them like one, because that's when they say, well, you paid me for Martin Luther King's birthday, but you're not supposed to do that. You're not supposed to do it. You gave me a sick day. No, you're sick, you're out, you're not working. So, and you want that kind of information in the contracts as well. You do, you want it in their contract. This is mine. If it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. If you're bringing people in and they're not helping you increase your revenue, they're not helping you with the project that you brought them in, it doesn't make sense and it doesn't make SE. So you have to always think about your financial bottom line. And your bottom line is, and what's interesting, another little commercial break from me, but what's interesting is that we think it, but we often don't do it because we know the 1099. I know he needs his job, I know his family, I know his kids, I know whatever. But when it comes down to that, you don't have those legal responsibilities to that person that you have with an employee. So I suggest you don't exercise it, but you don't start it either. You don't start it. And the challenges that I have with this and clients are those clients who have hired friends, children, and what am I going to do now? They're dopes. They're not doing the job. And I'm like, look, I told you. But I don't have repeat offenders in that category because they learn. Ultimately, they let them go, or ultimately their parents are so embarrassed they force them to quit or whatever, but ultimately they let them go. So back to the question about family, treat them as employees, even if it's just the two of you. The 1099s want more flexibility. Even the ones that represent the two categories, they want more flexibility. They want, they want to be in a position where they're coming into work one day and they may not come in the next. And so then you have to look at that. And that's why it's so good to have a contract. The benefits of the workforce, lower labor costs, especially if you limit overtime. This is for 1099s. Flexible staffing that grows as needed. So that's a benefit. Staff that's enthusiastic about scheduling options that fit their individual needs and lifestyles. This is them. They're excited about doing this because this is how they want to live their life. Let's see, I think some, I've got to read these out loud. I hope that's okay. I think some of my 1099s really should be employees, but I've never hired employees and I'm not sure where to start with that process. My contractors all work from home, as do I. They have been happy as contractors, but I feel like they should be employees. So let me answer this like this. So many of my businesses who registered their business, obviously in the state of New Jersey, they completed an NJ reg, or they did it with a third party. When it comes time to hire employees, I find out that they did not complete the total documents for the state. They only completed that first page. So if there's anything else they want to do in the state, and the state's a really interesting employer because they don't tell you, they wait till you want to do something. Want to do something such as certify your business, where somebody says, oh, you've got to pay your annual report and they haven't done it in 13 years. Then they attach all these penalties to it. So if you're looking to hire an employee, and I don't want to spend a lot of time in this, but I'd love to give you some information that I have. You want to make sure that you're ready to do it, not just financially, but that your business is set up to do it. So that you hire an employee, you make sure that their taxes are being sent to the state, benefits are already there, that all of these things you want to make sure that you want to give them a pay stub or you don't. All of these items should be on a checklist for you. before you hire an employee. And I think it's great if you can hire an employee. The state may be able to help you help you in terms of giving you some benefits and depending on what your occupation is. I mean, I'm all for hiring an employee. I'm all for putting people to work. But if you can hire an employee, you want to make sure that you're ready, that you that the days that they don't work, they get paid for those benefits. If it's a holiday, they're still going to get paid for it. You have to budget for that. You have to budget if they're, like I said earlier, exposed to COVID or not. They get a longer time, or they may have other benefits that they have, but anybody that you hire is entitled to the paid sick leave unless you're, I think it's 25 and below, 25 employees and below. If you're 50 and below, you don't have to give them family well, in New Jersey, it's FLA, not FMLA, but it's still superseded by FMLA. So these are the things that you have to think about when you're hiring employees. And if you have 1099s that are employees that are working for you at home, you want to make sure you have some policies for them. And I don't know what your business is, but just in general, I have clients that have have employees that are working at home, and then they have client meetings that are Zoom, and they show up and look really terrible. I have to write a policy about that. When you have a meeting with a client and you're on Zoom, it's like being in the office. And so then it got to the point that the staff meetings, they were showing up with an interesting attire. So I had to write a policy about that too, because we get comfortable. So 1099s, we're not writing a policy about them. You could write a policy that you hire them and what the expectations are, but we're not having a policy for them. And another thing too, with this client that I'm really crazy about, we're putting a handbook together for 1099s, and I'm vacillating between handbook or notes, because I don't want it to assume like that they're employees, but they're, in some businesses, 1099s have repeat functions. And instead of them asking you 10,000 times what they should do, it's better to put it in a document. I just really want to make sure that they know that it does not mean that they're employees or should consider themselves employees. Okay. What are your thoughts about the workforce being outsourced overseas, such as India? I don't have any problems with that, except that you have to make sure that you have to keep on top of what's happening in these countries. And I have many colleagues who were looking for good VAs, virtual assistants, and could not find them in the States. And then through a process of elimination, they found excellent ones in the Philippines that they're using right now, and just doing remarkable work for this client. You always want to make sure that you stay on top of what's happening in these countries, because if they shut down, so does your work. If that's all I'll say. I don't have a problem. I looked into it myself, but I was able to find a VA. I wanted a VA that was near me, even though I didn't want them in my office. I just wanted them near me in case I had to drop something off. And it took me a long time, but I did find a VA that's locally and does not want to work outside of the home. And when you think about how you're growing and where you want to be and how you spend so much time in your business and what that's doing to you, you think about the ancillary services that you could bring in at a price range. So getting a workforce that's out of the country, out of the US, is, especially in India and the Philippines, I have more knowledge about the Philippines, and I also have more knowledge about what's happening in Jamaica in this area, because they're so well trained, but don't have as many opportunities as they would have. That's something that I had considered, but fortunately, I was able to make other decisions. Okay, I answered that question already. We'll look at our time too. Major challenges: relying on short-term contractors can be risky because of while they're there, while they're in that position. And I use the word risky loosely. It could not fit into what your business model is, what your culture is. However, the 1099 workforce can offer many advantages to a company whose business models can accommodate and foster with an ever-changing workforce. So there's a lot in there. What's in there is that, yes, you can work with 1099s, and yes, you should be prepared to work with them. You should be prepared to work with them so you know that your business model can support this effort, and your business model, if it includes employees or employees, will be able to fit in with this model as well. And there's a lot to bringing in a 1099, in addition to them just doing great work or marginal work and get rid of them, or being too comfortable with the workforce. Not to say that they have to be antisocial, but they're not a member of the family. And once treated as such, then you should have some concerns. Again, I have to put the HR in here. The traditional form of employee relations. These are the things to build a workforce, a 1099 workforce, to replace or complement a more traditional form of. It's not employee relations with a 1099. There's no training and development, no policies and procedures. Not policies and procedures about them. You can have a policy and procedures, not policies and procedures for them. You can have a policy procedures in your employee handbook that you retain 1099s, and performance management, and many, many more. It's so interesting because when I wrote this at that time, I didn't see the piece about bonuses. It wasn't until I called the Department of Labor and they were able to give me this information. So, and I don't know what the pandemic has done, but I find government representatives a lot nicer now. So just give that as a tip. To make this change, more efficient recruiting process, to make the change to add on 1099s, these are what I recommend: time sensitivity to sourcing, to hiring, onboarding in days or weeks, not months, immediate decisions. So the time sensitivity to getting them, to bringing them on board, and to making an immediate decision. You don't have that much time with a 1099 that you do with an employee. Again, performance management, training and development must shift. And I'm a proponent that it must shift in general. Annual reviews may be irrelevant, consider more results-oriented objectives. So annual reviews, you can't do that with a 1099, but you can have conversations, ongoing conversations with them about their work. And I'm shifting from a business perspective, especially in light of 2020, whether that's not a recommendation that I would make to my clients going forward, because annual reviews are so intimidating and often not handled well. Retention, workplace atmosphere that is conducive to the flexible worker, so they return if needed, yet traditional for the employee who is paid salary and has different expectations. You know, the retention is, as long as you need me. For a 1099, for the traditional, I'm here for investments. And I find that language for employees, it makes it a better working environment for them. So they're more invested in the business as just opposed to doing their job. It's not easy to manage, but may be necessary to maintain your business. To not be able to implement some of these practices, it's not going to be easy. It may not be easy, but I think that as a business owner, you want to make sure that you have a culture. You have a culture that you can speak to, so people understand that if you're value driven, they have a value driven culture and there are expectations. This is so me. What is required from the employer? You have to embrace the change. You have to strive to perpetuate an atmosphere of transparency and respect for all who work in the company. Stay on top of HR and employment laws, which you can do. It's great to have a lawyer, but you don't have to have a lawyer initially until you get that letter that they're going to sue you. Remember the difference between a 1099 worker and an employee? Major difference. When you start to think 1099, no benefits at all, an employee, even if you're not giving them healthcare benefits and you fall under that above that threshold of having to give them paid sick leave, that is a benefit. And that paid sick leave is to part-time as well. So that's why I'm going to have to look at that. I have to look at that again, because there's a contradiction in the law. And I have no problems writing people and telling them like that. And you have to remain knowledgeable of the differences in contracts of the 1099 workers. That goes back to if you hire 3, they're doing same or similar jobs. If they come from a source that sends out 1099s, their contracts may be different. You have to stay on top of that, especially since many of them come from different sources. And they're going to talk about it. So you have to make sure that you adhere to it as well. So in summary, because I really wanted to make sure that I was available to answer your questions. Review your business model to ensure that you can manage the 1099 work on your traditional staff. If there's any time that you can use the word traditional, you can use it in this context. Traditional employees, 1099s. Research sources for 1099 workers so that you are not wasting time when they are needed. Network with other businesses. I mean, this was so key during 2020. Businesses started to talk to each other about how are you keeping that door open? And we're very open to share services and share ideas, and then sometimes even share workers, because the focus was to keep their people employed. Keep informed of changes in HR that will affect your business and may affect your profit. Make sure your employee handbook is up to date and our practices are consistent in application. You can have an employee handbook and you can have practices of how you do business. You can refer to the employee handbook, and sometimes the practices change. Practices aren't always consistent, but they're considered a practice that people abide by. So you have to be careful with your practices. Keep in mind that the 1099 worker wants flexibility. Knowing this alerts you to their employment needs. They want to be flexible. Example, snow days. Everybody else may come in the 1099, and I'm not putting the 1099 down. I'm just giving you an example. They may say, I'm not coming out today, it's snowing. So you have to be prepared for that as well. And then also reach out to us. If you have questions, we're a wealth of information about a wealth of different topics, like Takoa said, in regards to 1099s. In regards to, I want to say HR, they're my practices, in regards to QuickBooks, business plans, all of those different services that we offer. So I'm going to put my contact information up here, but I'm also here to answer questions that you have. Do you have a contract template for hiring contractors? I have a template. Where would I get that checklist? I can offer a checklist to you. So you, like Takoa said, you're going to sign into our website, and she'll send me the information, and I will send the information. Do you have any resources for VAs? I do. I do. And you're talking about virtual assistants. Virtual assistant, because guys, I also certify businesses. And I have to say this, there are some of my clients on that are in the certification process, and I'm so glad to see you, because it just reminds me of how great you are, but also how you're thinking about your business in total. Because once you get that contract, whether you're a prime or a sub, and they say, Do you have these people that can work on this with you? You want to be in a position to say, yes, yes, I do. Whether it's a resource that you can tap or people that you already have on board. You want to be in that position to say that and to sign up for a workshop like this makes me think that you're working totally on that you're thinking totally on your business, which is important. Let me see if there's another question. We can talk about the Jamaica piece. We can talk about the Jamaica piece. I will definitely share that with you. So what I want to go over with you before I leave you is the 1099 tax forms, NECs and the miscellaneous, the W-9 if you're so inclined to give them one. The fact that at some point in the life of the relationship, the 1099 has got to remember that has got to be reminded that they're not employees. Stay on top of your traditional workforce, which is your employees, whether they're part-time or full-time, to assure them that this group of 1099s is not there to replace them. Most of the time, the 1099s are there as a complement to the business and to get work out. Then you have every right to say that. Should they be involved in staff meetings? No. If you have something that you want to talk to the 1099 about, you bring them in and talk to them. But set a time to do that so they clearly understand what's expected. And look at the signs. If you see that their face isn't really understanding what you're saying, that may be a sign that they're not coming back because they don't have an allegiance to you. And I always think that just with employees, when I recruit, I always recruit more candidates than what the employer is looking for. Just in the event that it doesn't work, you should do that with 1099. If you found a resource that's good, you should establish a relationship with that resource. So if something happens, they can replace a good one with a better one. I'll look at it that way. I mean, these are things that I've learned in the HR business and working with 1099s. The handbook, the way we're designing this handbook, I think is really cool. She has a number of 1099s that come in where I'm looking at rules, not rules as much as what invoices should look like to get paid, when you're going to get paid, because it's all out of payroll. Ethics, and if it's ethics by discipline, if it's ethics, if you're hiring 1099 as accountants, there's an accountant ethics. I put that in their book as opposed to performance evaluations. Thinking of metrics, but we haven't got there yet. And what I also thought was really cool that she had recommended is that to put in an frequently asked questions from 1099s, but it depends on how many you get it. But because that will help you. If you can give them a document when they're starting and it has these questions, they don't have to call you all the time, or they shouldn't call you all the time. When am I getting paid? What do I have to do to get paid? It's there in the handbook. I'm also really big on creating PowerPoint presentations that will also address these issues. You send them the link, they look at it, have a great day. Communications, if they're working in a group home, if they're working off-site, what happens if something happens? And now, I gotta let you guys go. I want to kind of keep you. And now with everything that's going on in the world, I'm really big on accountability. Where are you? And so I write policies about that and what we should do if something happens. So I'm not saying have an emergency contact for your 1099 unless they're going to be there for a while. If you see this project, it's going to last for a while, but you can suggest to them, you're going to be here for like we consider this project for 3 months. If something should happen, is there someone I should call or something? You don't have to go into, do you need to go to the hospital or something like that, but I haven't seen anything where an employer was sued because something happened with the contractor. I haven't seen that, but I don't want to. That's why I'd rather, have that information for you. Let me see if there's anything over here. Can you share the template with me? Whoever is looking for that, you're gonna get something from me. You reach out to me, I will respond. One thing that I learned and that was helpful to me over the past few years is that you are paying 1099s through PayPal. You do not need to issue them 10 if you are doing it. Well, that's very interesting. You don't have to do it because PayPal takes care of it. And I'm so glad you brought that out because I don't think of fee-based resources for our clients, but she's absolutely right. If you pay them through PayPal, PayPal will do it, but there's a fee attached to it. You're paying that PayPal fee. And I thank you because I'll include that in the next program. I'll include some other things in the next program, but that's a great idea. And as far as the certifications are concerned, I'm doing a webinar on certifications on the 14th. That's next Tuesday. And that's a 90-minute webinar on what you have to do to get certified, what you need, questions. If you're working on it, fine, I can answer those questions. But what's really cool is in October, I'm doing my last 4-hour workshop. And my goal is for you to leave either with a completed application, okay, or knowing what you have to do to upload or send in your documents. So you'll probably get an announcement about that. So certifications are hot. And I'm dedicated to you as a client. So I thank you immensely for being a part of my webinar today. If there are any questions, if there are questions that weren't thought of during the webinar, but think of it after, please feel free to get in touch with our office and they will contact me. I want to see if Takoya is not on because I like her to finish out. Again, this is our service. This is a service that we offer to everybody and everybody in Essex County. Now there's a little caveat to this. If you're in Essex County, I can work with you. If you're not, everybody's going to get, I don't know what the hour is, but everybody could get a consultation with me. Everybody that attends, not signs up, but attends the workshop gets an hour or 2 with me, if you want. If you're outside of Essex County, there are some, I don't service them unless there are some questions that are answered. And I leave that up to the office. Because I'll work on the clients that they send me. So I want to make sure that, that you get that.
Right, Jeannie, you're correct. So when it comes to our workshops, we do offer a no-cost consultation with the presenter for our workshops. And then for our webinars, we do only service those within Essex County. And that is also true if you're looking for business counseling. We do only offer that to our Essex County clients. If you're not in Essex County, again, you can visit our headquarters website. I'll put it in the chat here, www.njsbdc.com. And you can type in your county and it will refer you to your local SBDC office where you can go ahead and request that business counseling.
So Takoya, one thing, there was a question about the September 14th webinar. It's not the same. This is the last time that I will be doing this webinar, but we've got two. Takoya, you should talk about the 2 exciting activities that we're doing on the 14th.
Right. So we are having our live Q&A session and webinars from September 13th to the 15th in honor of Small Business Week. So we will have different a Q&A and a webinar addressing sessions entrepreneurs in the small business community may have when it comes to startup, marketing, procurement, cybersecurity, manufacturing, and as well as financing. So I'll go ahead and post our links right now in the chat. So there you should be seeing some of our upcoming webinars, as well as the second link there. That's the link to check out more information on that event. Okay, thank you so much, Jeannie, for sharing your expertise.
Thank everyone.
Of course, thank you so much. So again, as Jeannie did mention, if you're in Essex County and you're looking for that post-webinar consultation, feel free to click the raise hand button here on Zoom, and I can go ahead and take note of your name and create that appointment with you and Jeannie, or feel free to visit our website again and request the business counseling there. Again, our one-on-one consultations are at no cost, so I do strongly advise taking advantage of that. So in the chat that I just posted, right after this webinar, we have our e-commerce planning part 3 advanced webinar. So if you're interested in learning more about e-commerce and delving a little deeper into it, please feel free to register for that webinar there. Okay, so let me take note of that. And the September 14th webinar, that is part of our Ask the Experts Live National Small Business Week webinar that we're hosting. So the link to that is also there. It'll be at 3 p.m. And Jeannie, as well as another one of our consultants, Karen, will also be presenting a Navigate Business Disruption and Manage Change webinar, which is on September 24th at 10 a.m. So if you find that you're interested in any of these topics, please, again, feel free to click on the links or copy and paste the links into your browser and register for that webinar. So we are hosting many other different webinars and workshops in topics such as financing, access to capital, marketing and branding, e-commerce, credit counseling, cybersecurity, state certifications, government contracting, human resourcing, and so much more. So you can visit our website to register for any of these webinars and workshops, and you will definitely find a webinar or workshop that best fits your business needs. And again, if you're interested in business counseling in any of these areas that I just mentioned, including COVID-19 disaster loans and grants or COVID general support, we do also offer no-cost counseling for that as well. I do want to remind you all that you will be receiving a video replay as well as the presentation slides within 48 to 72 hours. So you can have all this information to apply to your business and your business idea as well. After the webinar has ended in the browser, you will see a survey pop up. Now that survey will help us to adjust our presentations in the future, as well as give us some information on the type of assistance you may be needing for your business. So if you have just a minute or two to complete that, your feedback is very much appreciated. And on that note, we will now go ahead and end this webinar. I want to say thank you again to Jeannie for your time today. And thank you to all of our attendees for taking the time out to attend and participate in today's webinar. And we look forward to seeing you all at our future webinars and workshops. Goodbye, everyone.